Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling some uh, truly mind-bending territory.
Definitely.
We're looking into claims about secret alien meetings, the whole question of extraterrestrial contact.
And our way in is through some really interesting source material.
Exactly. We've got excerpts from a YouTube transcript, an interview with a former agent, someone who claims, well, firsthand involvement in these kinds of secret operations. So our mission, really, is to sort of cut through the noise, extract the most thought-provoking stuff from this interview.
Yeah, give you a concentrated look at these complex ideas and what they might mean. We're digging into the implications, the context.
Right. Not necessarily saying this is true, but exploring the claims.
Precisely. What can we learn from this perspective?
Okay, so the interviewee, he goes by Tim Tactics. Background is law and politics, double degree. Now he's more of a spiritual speaker.
But the core claim is his past involvement in these, let's say, unconventional programs.
Unconventional is putting it mildly. He talks about personal contact with non-Earth life forms.
Which naturally leads to the question, why talk about this now?
Good question. He points to an alleged policy shift at the Pentagon around 2019.
Ah, yes. The idea that they started encouraging people to share this kind of info.
That's what he suggests. He even mentions past comments by, Presidents Obama and Trump about UFOs, or UAPs as they're called now, as sort of signs of this change.
Interesting connection. It fits the narrative that things are opening up officially.
He's careful, though, about commenting on specific recent events, like those drones seen around Christmas 2024.
Understandable caution, maybe.
But he sees it all fitting into a bigger picture, a kind of disclosure process driven by authorities.
And he links this to something even bigger, doesn't he? This shift.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about a fundamental shift happening on Earth, like the planet's entering a new phase. And he believes that influenced the Pentagon policy.
So not just politics, but something cosmic.
Kind of. He even brings in the human nervous system, saying its alignment with this truth is key for disclosure to really land.
Wow. Okay, that's a fascinating layer. The idea that our own biology is part of this process of accepting, well, potentially reality-altering information.
It really is. So how does someone even get involved in something like this? Assuming it's real, of course.
Right, the recruitment.
Kim describes it as a multi-year thing. Started out looking like a normal job offer.
Standard vetting, background checks, that sort of thing.
Presumably. But the real nature unfolded slowly. His first task? Researching medieval governance.
Okay. Seems pretty far removed from ETs.
That's what you think. But then, he says he started finding these Latin texts discussing non-human life forms back in ancient Greece, unexpectedly.
Latin texts. In a medieval governance project, that does sound odd.
He suggests it might have been a test, or a way to gently introduce these concepts.
A filtering mechanism, maybe? See how he reacts?
Could be. He gives a specific example, a text about pea people in ancient Athens.
Pea people?
Yeah, described with unique physical traits and supposedly involved in building things like the Acropolis.
Wow. Okay, that's specific. And it definitely challenges the standard view of ancient history, if true. Makes you wonder about old myths and legends, doesn't it?
It really does. Now, shifting gears a bit. Roswell, 1947.
The classic touchstone.
Tim acknowledges, there are claims of much older contact, but he sees Roswell as pivotal, especially for the West.
The turning point.
More than that, he actually suggests it might have been intentional, not a crash, but a deliberate event.
Intentional to do what?
To introduce certain technologies. He specifically mentions fiber optics and the internet as direct results.
Whoa. Okay, that's a big claim. Linking Roswell directly to the internet, that definitely goes against the standard crashed saucer story.
Right. It reframes it completely.
It does, and it aligns with some theories about controlled contact or technology seeding, but it's definitely not the only interpretation out there.
He also notes, interestingly, that there was European interest in UFOs even before WWII.
Yeah.
Suggesting the focus just shifted after the war.
That's important context, too. It wasn't just an American phenomenon post-Roswell.
So if contact happened, who are we talking about? Who's supposedly here?
Yeah, the who.
He claims the CIA was formed shortly after Roswell, partly with a mandate to gather intel on ETs.
Right after Roswell. That timing is significant if accurate. Needs checking, but it's a strong claim about the agency's origins.
Then he tackles the old idea, maybe from the 50s, that there were only 7 types of ETs.
That old number, yeah. Seems limited.
He says that's totally outdated. He uses this analogy. Imagine looking at microscopic life in a garden. You wouldn't just say there are 7 microbes, right?
Good analogy. The universe is probably teeming with life, countless forms.
Exactly. But he says the current interest in these programs anyway is on specific life forms.
Okay, narrowing the focus, like which ones?
Well, he talks a lot about the grays.
Ah, the grays. Probably the most common image that comes to mind for many people. Abductions, implants.
He touches on that. Frequent encounters reported, sleep chambers, implants. And he alleges historical interactions with governments, especially after 47.
The idea of deals being made, technology for something else.
Yeah, offering advanced tech in exchange for contracts. He suggests maybe the full implications weren't grasped at the time.
That narrative of post-Roswell deals for tech is pretty persistent in ufology. The idea of misunderstood contracts adds a layer of, well, potential regret or complexity.
Definitely. Now, he also describes his own first direct experience.
Okay, this should be interesting.
He says he was asked just to witness an experiment, not take part.
An observer role, okay.
And the experiment involved, get this, solidifying light particles.
Solidifying light.
He uses an analogy,
Yeah.
like exploring under the surface of an ocean of light, and within an opened field of light.
Yeah.
He saw 3 small figures, holographic looking, not fully 3D in our usual sense.
Holographic, not physical beings.
Appearing that way, yes. But he estimated they'd be about 2 meters tall in their actual reality.
That description. Field of light, holographic. It suggests something really beyond our normal physics. Maybe interdimensional or energetic.
Could be. It definitely challenges our ideas of solid matter.
And being an observer first, that suggests a controlled, maybe gradual introduction for him too.
Seems plausible within that narrative.
Hmm.
He also talked about analyzing transmissions.
Transmissions, like radio signals.
More than that. He said it includes things like videos, audio, various info forms. But their communication methods are diverse.
Not just talking, then.
Right. Frequencies, electromagnetic fields, even mental communication.
Telepathy.
Seems like it.
Uh-huh.
He mentioned that in the programs he knew, they often used a device for communicating with the grays. Looked like a thin glass tablet.
A piece of tech, okay?
Yeah, with 2 fields on it. One showed the gray language, the other showed a German translation.
German. Interesting choice.
He joked it was sometimes like an early, clunky Google Translate.
Huh. Okay, so challenges in translation, even with tech. That makes sense. Communication beyond language. Frequencies, mental. That opens up a whole range of possibilities and difficulties.
Absolutely. Which leads to another big question. Are these beings here willingly? Or are they, captured, studied against their will?
That's a crucial ethical point, isn't it?
He says different groups had different views on this. But his view, it's basically impossible to contain a gray against its will.
Why? Too smart, too advanced.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Their intelligence, plus potentially other ways to leave, traverse dimensions or whatever.
So they're likely here because they choose to be, in his view.
That's his take. He classifies them as an invasive or actively engaging species.
Invasive sounds negative, though.
He clarifies that. Not necessarily hostile, but active, exploring. They supposedly have a mission related to life's evolution in the universe.
This mission, what is it?
He sums it up as serve, protect, and synthesize.
Serve, protect, synthesize. Sounds grand, almost like a cosmic directive.
Yeah, and he adds that their preferred communication is mental.
Telepathic again.
Right. But sometimes in these programs, it was facilitated or monitored by a device, and very rarely they might make vocal sounds, described as metallic.
Metallic sounds, not biological voices. Fascinating detail. The idea they can't be contained really emphasizes their potential advancement.
So, okay, we've talked about the grays, but what about others? That old 7 species number seems way too small now.
Right, if the garden analogy holds true.
Tim clarifies that the 7 probably just referred to the first few actively engaging types that governments focused on back in the mid-20th century.
The ones they were maybe dealing with directly.
Seems like it. He then puts out this ratio, 95% socially acceptable life forms in the universe versus 5% socially unacceptable.
95 to 5. That's actually quite hopeful, if true. But what does socially unacceptable mean here?
Good question. He's careful to say it doesn't automatically mean evil or malevolent. It could just be conflicting agendas, different goals, maybe methods we wouldn't agree with.
Okay, so more about compatibility or alignment than good versus evil. That's an important distinction.
Definitely. He also brings up channeling. People claiming to channel beings like Arcturians or Pleiadians.
Yeah, that's a whole other area. How does he fit that in?
He suggests these could be examples of what he calls vertical evolution, life forms.
Vertical evolution. As opposed to.
Horizontal, like us and maybe the grays, evolving within a certain physical or dimensional framework. Vertical implies beings existing beyond that.
Like energy beings.
Oh, yeah.
Or on different frequency levels.
Exactly. He used the analogy of radio frequencies. Can't hear all stations at once. They exist on different levels. These beings might be on a frequency we don't normally perceive.
That's a helpful way to think about it. It allows for possibilities beyond just nuts and bolts aliens and ships.
Right. And his current estimate for the number of known ET types.
Let me guess. More than 7.
Huh. Try over 10,000.
10,000. Wow.
And he adds that number is probably limited just by our ability to even process the data.
Okay, the scale is just immense. Mind-boggling, really.
Yeah.
10,000 known types, and that's potentially just the tip of the iceberg.
It really puts things in perspective. Which brings us to another huge concept he discusses, this consciousness shift.
The shift again, yeah. He links it to cycles.
Galactic cycles. And cycles of around 12,500 to 15,000 years.
Those long-term cycles you hear about in some alternative theories.
Right. He uses an analogy of cosmic seasons. As our solar system moves through the Milky Way, we pass through different regions of space, some with higher information density than others, like cosmic winter, spring, summer.
So we're moving into a cosmic spring or summer, maybe, a denser information field.
That's the idea, and he connects this to things we are observing. Increased solar activity, changes in the Earth's core rotation, potential physical signs of this shift.
Tying cosmic ideas to actual geophysics and solar physics, that makes it feel a bit more grounded, even if the core idea is huge.
And the implication. This shift could actually alter the perceived laws of physics, change reality as we know it.
Alter physics? How?
And make it more fluid, baby. Open doors to new phenomena, new interactions, including potentially more open contact with other life forms, the horizontal interactions.
So the shift enables more contact.
Potentially. He talks about reality levels. Earth moving from, say, a level 3 reality, more limited, rigid physics, to a level 4.
Level 4 being?
More quantum, boundless, where limitations like you can't walk through walls become less absolute. Perception changes.
That's a radical idea, a fundamental change in reality itself.
It is. And he points to the rise of AI as one possible manifestation of this shift already happening, a new kind of intelligence emerging.
Linking AI to a cosmic consciousness shift. That's a connection I hadn't considered. It reframes AI development significantly.
So, given all this, these incredible claims, how do we deal with the fact that for most people it still feels unreal?
Yeah, the disconnect between hearing about it, even seeing official reports on UAPs, and actually feeling it's real.
Tim addresses that. He says the human mind can know something is real intellectually, but not emotionally accept it.
The head versus heart thing.
Kind of. He uses crop circles as an example. Some see complex geometry, potential non-human intelligence. Others see teenagers with boards and rope.
Right. The interpretation depends heavily on your existing beliefs, even when faced with the phenomenon itself.
Exactly. So he suggests that when presidents or officials make statements about UAPs, it's partly designed to create that click moment.
To help bridge that gap between intellectual awareness and gut-level acceptance.
That seems to be the idea. He thinks widespread acceptance is inevitable eventually.
So what should we be doing now, according to him?
Focusing on making the transition smooth. Preparing ourselves, our societies. He sees this shift not as scary, but as this massive opportunity for human evolution.
An evolutionary leap spurred by this shift and potential contact.
Yeah. And he shared his own sort of initial mantra or message he received about it. Everything shifted happily.
Everything shifted happily. That's very positive, an intentional framing.
He suggests adopting that kind of intention helps align your own frequency with a positive outcome. He encourages you, the listener, to think about that, setting a positive intention for this unfolding process.
That's quite empowering, actually. Moving from passive observer to active participant through intention, it highlights the psychological and perhaps even spiritual aspect of navigating such potentially huge changes.
It does. And finally, he touches upon the deepest question, maybe, the meaning of life.
Okay, the big one. What's his take?
Simply, to create.
To create.
He explains it as consciousness itself became aware it could modulate energy. And by doing that, it could create. The universe, experience, all of it is part of that ongoing creation.
So existence is an act of creation by consciousness.
That's the essence. He mentions a first creator concept. He says many ET species believe in a plan for all beings to eventually create freely and experience joy together.
That's a profoundly hopeful vision. A universe geared towards shared creation and joy. It ties everything together in a rather beautiful way.
It really does. And that kind of wraps up our deep dive for today. We've covered a lot of these extraordinary claims, the idea of disclosure changing, the different types of beings, this massive consciousness shift.
It's definitely a lot to chew on. Think about which parts of this really struck a chord with you. What questions pop up now?
Absolutely. We really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas on your own.
Yeah, consider the possibility. What if reality is much stranger, more interconnected, more conscious than we usually think?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We always aim to bring you these concentrated doses of, well, intriguing knowledge and different viewpoints.
And maybe we'll dive into related areas again if there's interest.
Definitely leaves you thinking, though.
It does. Maybe the final thought is this. If this shift is happening, if creation is the point, how will you choose to add your own creative spark to whatever's unfolding?
Something to ponder.
Yeah.
Until our next deep dive.